Hello, fellow book lovers of the internet. It is Cecil, it is Wednesday, and this week I have something for you guys that is not a writing vlog. As I'm sure most of you are aware now, June is Pride Month. At least that is when we celebrate Pride here in the US, as the anniversary of the Stonewall riots. Um, and as somebody who is a part of the queer community, that's something that I wanted to talk about, both from the lens of somebody who is a storyteller and somebody who has consumed stories my whole life. Now, while I am Gen Z, I am on the older side of Gen Z, right? So growing up, while there was this like rapid changing perspective towards the queer community, we were gaining slowly more and more representation and more acceptance. Um, there was still a lot of homophobia. And I mean, there's still a lot of homophobia now, but I would say that public opinion is pretty much it's it's majorly better than it was. While I got to, especially going into my teen years, experience all of this sudden embracing of queerness and being different in real time, there was still that period of time where it was not super embraced. A lot of the times I had experiences that made no sense to me, and I didn't have the vocabulary to explain. I kept waiting for a day to come that I'd feel like everybody else felt, and I'd get it, and it would all make sense, and that day just never came. So eventually I was pretty sure there was just something wrong with me, or everybody else was pretending. I was in 8th grade when Nika D'Angelo was confirmed to be gay. And I don't think I'd ever cried so hard at a scene in a book. And rereading it still definitely gives me chills. It's definitely an emotional scene, but the amount I cried, it wasn't about that. It was about the fact that I was at the height of my internalized homophobia and self-loathing because I was 14. I knew what it meant to be gay, but I hated that for myself. I have always had a very special relationship with the Percy Jackson books. From pretty much their beginning. They have been a part of most of my life at this point. So, this story that had meant so much to me for so much of my life, showing me that I'm not alone in this world, that meant more than any words can ever truly express. Not much later, same author, Rick Riordan, introduced a gender fluid character into his little mythos universe, Alex Fierro. And I had never seen a non-binary gender fluid character in a book, you know? That was wild. I At that point I had already been out as gender fluid, right? Like that was just something that I'd figured out at that point. But seeing it represented, I felt so happy, you know? Representation can do so much for people. It can make people in marginalized groups feel seen, feel like they're not alone, feel like their experiences, their existence is valid. And for people who are not in those marginalized groups, it can help them relate to those marginalized groups and see them as fellow human beings, which dehumanization is at the root of prejudice. This year, we are living through some very bad anti trans and anti queer rhetoric through this country. Pride campaigns are being pulled or toned down, and it's getting dangerous to exist. I wrote this script a few days before it happened, but the Human Rights Campaign called a state of emergency for queer people in the US. It's a scary time to exist and to just be a person who doesn't, fit the cis heteropatriarchy. One of the big things that's happening is representation is being censored and taken away under the guise of protecting the children, but The reality is that they think that if they take away the representation, then their kids will just never turn out to be queer. And as somebody who didn't have that representation when I was little and still ended up very queer, it's not going to work. And they know it's not going to work, but if they can other us and make us feel enough like freaks, they know. They've seen the studies at this point. They know that it boils over into depression and suicidality. I was 6 years old the first time I thought I was supposed to have been a boy. 6. I didn't know what a trans person was, and I didn't know that there were options other than girl or boy. And I had that feeling. And then it would go away and be like, no, I was supposed to be a girl. And I would feel totally normal. It wasn't like denying it or anything. It was just like, no, I feel completely different about it right now. And it would fluctuate back and forth. And I was very confused about that because it didn't make any sense why it would be like that. And turns out I'm gender fluid. That's why it would be like that. But it took 8 years to have that word to describe that experience. When I was 9, I started having dreams that I kissed one of my friends, one of my girl friends. And I tried to unpack that dream in every way possible to make it mean something else. But it didn't. I'd already heard the word gay at that point in my life, and I knew that was me. I was terrified that people would know just if I looked at them. I definitely had nothing to go on that would suggest that it was okay. Representation changes lives. It saves lives. It makes people feel less alone in the world. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely still people who can consume queer fiction and still be queerphobic in their everyday life because there is not, a one-to-one rate of affecting between fiction and reality. But the impact that stories can make, it means something. Keep writing the stories that are going to make a difference. Because if I can put representation in my books and write books that people who are younger will read and will see that they are not the only one like themselves in the world, that's all I could hope for. Keep telling your stories. Keep telling queer stories. Keep putting representation into the world and speaking out against injustices. We'll get through this.